I walked into the old apartment, the air thick and heavy. The smell hit me before I even saw him. It was sharp, almost sour, a mixture of sweat and something chemical. I froze for a moment, trying to place it, but it was unlike anything I had encountered. He stood by the sink, humming quietly, unaware of the cloud around him. I noticed the bathroom door slightly ajar, a faint yellow stain near the bottom. The tiles were grimy, and the soap dish was coated with residue. I realized then the smell came not from the room alone, but from him. The first thing I noticed was the way he rarely bathed. The second, his towels looked decades old, stiff and faded. I could see the layers of grime clinging to his skin. The third habit was shocking, his nails long and caked with dirt. Each movement sent a faint but pungent scent rising into the air. The fourth habit was even worse. I saw the showerhead coated with limescale and mold. He never cleaned it, never touched it with care. Every time he used it, the water carried the smell of decay onto him. The fifth habit made the room unbearable. He kept a collection of unwashed clothes in the corner, a mountain of yellowed shirts and worn socks. They absorbed the odor, feeding it back into the air with each small movement. I stepped closer, my stomach tightening. The smell wrapped around me, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to say something, to warn him, but my words caught in my throat. It was not just a matter of hygiene, it was a creeping, pervasive decay that seemed to cling to every fiber of the room and his body. I could feel my eyes watering, my senses screaming for relief. The smell was alive, almost mocking me, whispering how long this had been ignored. I realized that this was more than a simple neglect. It was a ritual of avoidance, a pattern repeated for decades. I stepped back, gagging slightly, and felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was impossible to ignore the truth. These 5 habits were not small details, but a cascade of choices that made him untouchable by normal human standards. I wondered how many people had walked in before me and turned away silently, their noses pinched, hearts racing. I knew I had to leave, but I could not stop looking. The smell clung to the walls, the air, the furniture. It followed me to the doorway and beyond, lingering in my mind. I had never imagined that something so simple as daily habits could transform a man into this. I closed the door behind me, trying to breathe. The memory of that smell stayed with me. It was a warning I could not shake, a lesson hidden in 5 small neglected actions. I stepped out into the hallway, trying to shake off the lingering scent, but it clung to my clothes like a shadow. Even the faintest breeze seemed tainted, carrying whispers of sweat, mildew, and decay. My stomach churned, and I realized how close I had been to stepping entirely into a different world. A world where neglect had created its own ecosystem, feeding off itself, thriving quietly behind closed doors. I could not stop thinking about his routine, or the lack of one. Each morning he probably woke to the same stale, suffocating air, never questioning it. He probably thought it was normal. Each night he returned to the same worn sheets, the same untouched surfaces, the same pile of clothes growing like a small, smelly mountain in the corner. And each time the smell deepened, embedding itself not just in the room, but into him, into his very skin. I remember the detail I had initially overlooked. The sink drain. It was clogged, crusted with something that looked like hardened soap and rust. Every drop of water that flowed through it carried an invisible stain of odor, a residue that coated his hands every time he washed them. Even brushing his teeth, the water carried with it a faint acidic tang. I realized it was impossible for him to cleanse himself completely because the environment itself was corrupt. The thought made my stomach twist. It was not just about bad habits, it was about a cycle of negligence, repeated day after day, year after year. He had unknowingly built a prison of odor around himself, a barrier for anyone who might come close. And the worst part was how easily it could be normalized. To him, it was ordinary. To anyone else, it was almost unbearable. I could picture it vividly now. The mornings when he opened the bathroom door and felt nothing. The smell did not surprise him. It was part of the furniture, part of the tiles, part of him. And yet, for anyone stepping inside for the first time, it was shocking. It assaulted the senses like a punch, overwhelming the nose, the throat, the mind. It was a warning, an invisible red flag that whispered, "Do not come closer. Do not stay." I began to understand that smell was not random. It was a consequence, a clear message written in the language of neglect. Each dirty towel, each unwashed shirt, each long day without a proper shower was a chapter in this silent story. Even the air was trapped, recycling the stench, spreading it slowly like an invisible fog. And what was horrifying was that it was preventable. All of it could have been avoided with small, simple acts of care. But instead, he had let time pass. And with it, the habits that led to this moment had compounded. I wondered about his past, about what had led him to embrace such neglect. Was it laziness? Was it forgetfulness? Was it resignation to age, thinking it no longer mattered? Or had he simply never learned how small daily acts could prevent this slow, creeping decay? As I walked down the hallway, I noticed the faint smell lingering around my shoes. It was subtle but unmistakable. It made me feel nauseous, but also intensely curious. How many other rooms, other apartments, other lives were quietly harboring the same secret? It was a thought that made my skin crawl. I realized that smell in this case was not just about hygiene. It was about identity, about the choices a person makes, consciously or unconsciously, and the consequences that follow. It was a physical manifestation of neglect, stubbornness, and habit, and it was terrifying in its permanence. Because even if he decided to change tomorrow, the memory of it would remain, trapped in the fibers of his clothes, the tiles, and even the air itself. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to wipe away the sensation. The shock of it was more than I had expected. It was intimate and invasive, a smell that felt like it could seep into my mind as well as my nose. And yet, it was also fascinating. There was a story here, a story written not with words but with years of repeated actions, or inaction. The thought made me shiver. I thought about the 5 habits again. Never bathing, never washing clothes, letting towels sit forever, ignoring the shower head, neglecting the sink. Each one seemed minor alone, almost laughable. But together they formed a force, a presence that was impossible to ignore. It was a warning about the power of small, repeated choices. It was a testament to the way habits can shape reality, even to the point of creating physical manifestations that repel and shock others. I could not help but feel a mixture of disgust and pity. Disgust at the intensity of the smell and the obvious neglect. Pity for the man who had unknowingly trapped himself in this invisible prison. I wondered if anyone had ever told him, if anyone had ever tried to help, or if he was entirely oblivious, living in a world of his own making. I stepped outside, taking a deep, cautious breath. The air felt cleaner, lighter, yet the memory of that smell followed me. It clung to my thoughts, replaying the image of the unwashed apartment, the yellowed towels, the moldy showerhead. I knew I would not forget it anytime soon. The smell had left its mark, not just on my clothes, but on my mind. And then I realized something chilling. It was not just about one old man. It could happen to anyone. Habits were powerful, capable of shaping not just our bodies, but the environment around us. Neglect was contagious, insidious, slowly transforming the familiar into something grotesque. And the 5 small bathroom habits were a perfect example of how easily we could let things spiral out of control. I walked away, my stomach still uneasy, my senses still tingling. I knew that I had witnessed something rare and unsettling, and yet it was a lesson I could carry forward. Because in understanding the cause of the smell, in seeing the habits that created it, I could never ignore my own. I could not allow small acts of neglect to grow into something that would one day overwhelm me as it had overwhelmed him. I realized then that the smell was not just a physical presence, it was a warning, a story of choices repeated until they become impossible to ignore. It taught me that small acts matter, that hygiene is more than routine. It is respect for oneself and for others. Neglect might seem harmless in the moment, but over time it accumulates into something heavy, suffocating, unavoidable. I took a deep breath of fresh air, letting it fill my lungs, clearing my mind. The memory of that smell lingered faintly, a shadow of discomfort, but also a lesson. And in that lesson I found clarity. Care for oneself is never trivial, And habits, even small ones, have power far greater than we often realize. I exhaled slowly, letting the lesson settle within me. The memory of that old apartment, the 5 habits, and the pervasive smell would remain a warning. Not a source of shame or fear, but a reminder that the choices we make daily shape not just our bodies, but the very atmosphere around us. And with that thought, I walked forward, determined to live differently, and to never underestimate the power of small, consistent acts of care.